Millionaire returns earlier than expected and uncovers shocking secret. Before we dive into this emotional story, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. It's always special to get to know the people who follow our stories. And if you enjoy emotional love stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss any new videos and you'll help the channel grow more and more. The soft sound of the imported car's tires echoed on the marble driveway leading to the entrance of the Beverly Hills mansion. The California sky was clear, and the gentle breeze made the palm trees sway under the golden sun. No one was expecting him. The trip to Europe was supposed to last a few more days, but a canceled meeting in Paris had brought him back early. Alexander stepped out of the car with his usual imposing presence. He was 36 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, with slightly wavy dark brown hair slicked back. His strong, well-defined features wore an expression of coldness and fatigue. His gray eyes watched everything with suspicion, as if the world around him was always on the verge of disappointing him. He wore a flawless navy blue suit that highlighted his controlled and powerful posture. He crossed the mansion's hallway, a grand space of white marble and classic columns, but noticed something strange: silence. There were no voices, no children's laughter, not even the sound of the staff tending to the house. Intrigued, he followed the distant sound of a soft voice coming from the backyard. When he reached the glass door that led outside, he stopped, surprised by what he saw. There, on the perfectly trimmed lawn, was Emily Carter, the nanny. The 28-year-old woman wore simple clothes, jeans and a light-colored blouse. Her light brown hair was tied back in a ponytail, and the sunlight brought out the warm tone of her fair skin. Her deep brown eyes shone with tenderness as she gave her full attention to the children. Emily was kneeling beside Lucas, one of the 5-year-old twins. The blonde-haired, light blue-eyed boy trembled with each step. His small crutches supported his frail body, and each effort drew subtle expressions of pain. But the determination in his eyes contrasted with the struggle of his legs. "Come on, Lucas, just one more step. I know you can do it. Look at me. You're stronger than you think," Emily said with a sweetness that made each word feel like a hug. Alexander, hidden behind the glass door, watched silently. A few feet away, on a blanket spread across the grass, Sophie was focused on gripping a thick pencil with her deformed hand. Her partially fused fingers made movement difficult, but she kept trying. Her tongue sticking out showed the kind of concentration only a child deep in a task could have. Emily divided her attention, encouraging both children with the same tenderness. "That's it, Sophie. It looks great. It doesn't matter if the letters are a little crooked. What matters is that you're trying. I'm so proud of you." Sophie looked up at the nanny, her blue eyes shining with joy. "Do you really think it's pretty, Mommy?" Emily froze for a moment. Her lips trembled, but she didn't correct the child. She simply smiled with tears in her eyes and replied softly, "It's beautiful, my love. It's perfect." Alexander felt his chest tighten. The shock cut through his usual coldness like a blade. "Mommy?" The word echoed in his mind. In that moment, a consuming doubt took hold. Why were his children calling the nanny Mom? Alexander stood still for a few seconds behind the glass door, his breathing heavy. His racing heart pounded in his chest as if searching for an answer. He didn't have. The words still echoed in his mind. Mommy. The millionaire, so used to dealing with billion-dollar figures, contracts, and manipulation, suddenly felt vulnerable, something he hadn't experienced in a long time. He shoved the glass door open forcefully and stepped into the garden. The sudden sound startled Emily, who stood up quickly, while Lucas almost lost his balance on the crutches. Sophie dropped her pencil and widened her blue eyes, surprised to see her father home so early. Alexander walked toward them with firm, steps, his flawless suit a stark contrast to the simple domestic scene. His gray eyes were cold as blades. "Would someone like to explain what's going on here?" he asked in a cutting tone, staring directly at Emily. The nanny took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Mr. Reed, I was just helping Lucas with his exercises and encouraging Sophie to write." Alexander gave a bitter, sarcastic smile. "Is that so? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like more than just a nanny doing her job." Emily swallowed hard, unsure how to respond immediately. The silence hung heavy in the air. Lucas gripped his crutches tighter, and Sophie ran to hold the nanny's hand. They need encouragement, they need affection and patience," Emily said, trying to keep her trembling voice steady. Alexander stepped closer, closing the space between them, and stared at her as if trying to decipher her. "Affection? Patience? Don't make me laugh. You're taking advantage of their limitations to win their trust. You expect me to believe this is just kindness?" "No, Emily. Nothing in this world comes without a price." The words fell on her like invisible knives. Emily felt her throat tighten, her eyes brimming with tears, but she kept her chin up. She wouldn't let him see her break. "With all due respect, sir, you're wrong," she replied, firm despite the lump forming in her throat. "I take care of Lucas and Sophie because they need it, because they deserve real attention, not just luxury and marble walls." Alexander's face hardened. Even more, the irony in his eyes replaced by a restrained fury. "Real attention? Are you implying that I don't give that to my own children?" Emily hesitated, the silence betraying her. She didn't dare confirm it aloud, but her tearful eyes gave away the answer she tried to hide at that moment. Lucas raised his voice, trying to protect the nanny. "Daddy, don't be mad at Emily. She just wants to help us. She's always here when you're not." The words were innocent, but they hit Alexander like an unexpected blow. He turned his gaze to his son, stunned, and for a moment, the mask he always wore cracked. Emily, sensing the tension rise, crouched to the twins' level and whispered gently, "It's okay, my loves. Daddy's just tired. He didn't mean to scare you." Alexander took a deep breath, trying to regain control, but inside, something had already begun to crumble. The bond his children had with Emily seemed stronger than the one they had with him. Silence once again fell over the garden. But this time it was charged with suppressed emotions, unspoken words, and a growing flame of mistrust. Alexander narrowed his eyes, staring at Emily as if trying to pull a hidden secret out of her. "I will find out what really brought you into this house," he murmured in a low but firm tone, leaving the promise of a bigger confrontation hanging in the air. Emily took a deep breath, keeping her gaze locked with his, even though her heart was in pieces. Alexander stepped back into the mansion with firm strides, but inside, he was torn. The silence of the luxurious walls followed him like an echo of the loneliness he never dared to admit out loud. He climbed the stairs with clenched fists, mentally repeating the word that tormented him most, "Mommy." He couldn't accept that his children, heirs to the Reed name, were calling another woman their mother. Out in the garden, Emily was still with the children, but the weight of the confrontation crushed her from within. She kept smiling at Lucas and Sophie, but her heart pounded with the painful memory she carried in secret hours later. After putting the twins to bed, Emily remained seated beside the bed. Lucas was already asleep, his little crutches resting against the knitstand, but Sophie was still holding the nanny's hand. "Emily, you're not going away, are you?" the girl asked in a sleepy voice. Emily held back her tears, gently caressed the girl's blonde hair, and whispered, "Never, sweetheart. I promised your mommy I'd take care of you." "And a promise like that, you keep it to the end." When Sophie closed her eyes, Emily stood up slowly. She walked to the bedroom window and stared at the night sky over Los Angeles. The memory came rushing back, as vivid as the day it happened. It was a rainy afternoon 3 years ago. Emily was working at a modest cafe downtown. A well-dressed woman with a sad smile and distant eyes had walked in and ordered a cappuccino. They ended up sitting down to talk, though Emily never really understood why the stranger had felt drawn to her. Within minutes, the two had shared confidences. "My name is Catherine Reed," the woman had said, adjusting her hastily tied blonde hair. "Life has given me plenty of luxury, but it's taken away my peace. I'm afraid that if something ever happens to me, my children will grow up surrounded only by money without real affection." Emily remembered how those words had struck her. She had come from a harsh childhood herself, starved for love. Maybe that's why their connection was so immediate. That same evening, Catherine returned, visibly nervous, speaking quickly as if she could sense a tragedy looming. "Emily, you seem like someone I can trust. If I'm ever not around, please take care of Lucas and Sophie. Promise me they'll never feel alone." Emily still remembered her own trembling hands holding Catherine's. I promise with all my heart." Less than 24 hours later, the news spread. Catherine had died in a fatal car crash on the highway, returning home. Emily mourned in silence, never finding the courage to approach the Reed family. But months later, fate saw to it that she ended up there, in the mansion, as the twins' nanny. And ever since, her secret had followed her like a shadow. She wasn't there just for the job, she was fulfilling a desperate mother's final wish. Now, with Alexander growing suspicious of her motives, Emily knew that revealing the truth could mean the end. He would never believe in a promise made under such improbable circumstances. Worse, he could fire her and take the children away from her, shattering the only vow she would never dare break. As she walked down the stairs slowly, she found Alexander waiting in the hall. He stood with his hands in his suit pockets, his gaze sharp as ever. "You're hiding something from me, aren't you?" he asked in a grave tone. Emily froze. Her eyes welled up, but she lifted her chin, refusing to let herself be shaken. "No, sir. I'm just doing my job." Alexander stepped closer, his voice lower, but even more threatening. "I will find out, Emily. You can be sure of that." Emily held back the tears until he walked away, but once she was alone, the weight of the promise echoed in her chest. "I can't fail you, Catherine. I can't fail them." In the silence of the night, the nanny wrapped her arms around herself, torn between loyalty to a sacred promise and the fear of losing everything. The night deepened silently within the Reed mansion. It was nearly 2 in the morning when Emily, seated in an armchair in the children's bedroom, rocked Sophie gently in her arms. The little girl often had nightmares and wept softly, clinging to the nanny's blouse as if afraid to be left alone. "It's okay, my love. I'm here. No one's going to leave you," Emily whispered, stroking the girl's blonde hair. Lucas, lying in the bed beside them, kept his eyes open, watching the scene. His crutches rested against the headboard, but he didn't seem concerned with physical pain. His voice came out low, heavy with sadness. "Emily, why doesn't Daddy stay with us at night? Doesn't he like us?" Emily felt her heart tighten. She tried to smile, but a tear slipped down her face, betraying her. She sat on the edge of Lucas's bed, held his small hand, and answered gently, "Your dad does love you. He just doesn't know how to show it. But that doesn't mean he doesn't care." Lucas frowned, his eyes fixed on the dark ceiling. "Mommy knew how. She always kissed us goodnight. She made us laugh." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the flood of emotion. Sophie, half asleep, murmured, "I miss her every day." Those simple words echoed through the room like invisible knives. Emily hugged both children tightly, covering them with kisses and gentle caresses, offering the only comfort she had to give. Downstairs, Alexander watched from a distance. He didn't want to go up, yet couldn't ignore the faint sound of his children's voices drifting down from above. Every time he heard them call for Emily with affection, something inside him burned. It wasn't just jealousy. It was a mix of rage and helplessness. The next morning, the scene repeated itself, this time with a different tone. While Emily served breakfast in the bright, spacious kitchen, Lucas was trying to cut his bread by himself, but the knife kept slipping from his fragile hands. Sophie, meanwhile, struggled to hold her glass with her malformed hand, spilling some juice on the table. "It's okay, sweetie," Emily said quickly, grabbing a cloth to clean up the mess. "What matters is that you're trying." The children smiled, feeling reassured. But at that moment, Alexander walked in. He wore a light gray suit, ready for another day of business, and stopped abruptly at the sight. "This is unacceptable," he stated firmly. "You are Reeds. You can't settle for weakness. The world won't have patience with you." Lucas lowered his head, ashamed. Sophie clung to Emily's hand, her eyes filling with tears. The nanny took a deep breath and replied, without lowering her voice, "With all due respect, Mr. Reed, they're children. They need encouragement, not pressure." Alexander looked at her as if she had crossed a dangerous line. "You don't understand anything, Emily. They need to learn to be strong. And you're making my children weak." Still holding Sophie's hand, Emily met his gaze, unwavering. "No, sir. I'm giving them something money can't buy. Love. And that's what makes them strong." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Alexander clenched his fists, unable to respond. The silence was finally broken by Lucas, who raised his head and spoke with the innocence only a child could have. "Daddy, Emily makes us feel safe. Why don't you try being like her sometimes?" The room seemed to freeze. Alexander didn't react at first, his face hardened, but his eyes gave away the sting of a fresh wound. Without another word, he turned and walked out, his footsteps cold and distant down the hallway. Emily hugged the twins, who sobbed softly and whispered, "I promise I'll take care of you, no matter what it costs." Upstairs, Alexander locked himself in his office, his eyes fixed on an old photograph of Catherine. The words of his son wouldn't stop echoing in his mind. "Why don't you try being like her sometimes?" It was an accusation that hurt more than any failed contract ever could. The rain poured heavily that night in Los Angeles. Drops beat against the large glass windows of the Reed mansion as if trying to break through the silence that ruled the place. Alexander was in his office, the desk lamp casting light over papers scattered across the table. But even with numbers and contracts before his eyes, he couldn't concentrate. The sound of the storm mixed with the echo of a recent memory, Lucas's innocent voice asking why he couldn't be more like Emily. Restless, he got up and walked down the quiet hallway. As he passed the children's bedroom, a soft sound made him stop. The door was slightly ajar, and a gentle melody drifted out. He approached, drawn in by the tender, almost motherly tone. When he pushed the door open, the scene before him struck like a blow. Emily sat at the edge of the bed, cradling the twins against her chest. Lucas, his crutches resting beside the bed, lay with his head in her lap. Sophie, curled up in her other arm, slept with her thumb in her mouth. Emily, her eyes brimming with tears, sang softly a lullaby. "Close your eyes, little star. Mommy's here, not too far." Her voice cracked mid-song, and a tear slipped down her cheek. Emily leaned down to kiss the children's foreheads and whispered, "I promised I'd never leave you alone. I promised." Then Alexander heard something he never imagined. Lucas mumbled, half asleep, "Good night, Mommy." Sophie echoed sweetly, "Love you, Mommy." Emily didn't correct them. She only hugged them tighter, letting the tears fall freely. Alexander burst into the room, the door slamming against the wall. His voice thundered, filled with fury and disbelief. What the hell is going on? Emily stood up abruptly, still, holding the drowsy Sophie clinging to her neck. Her heart pounded. Mr. Reed, don't you dare lie to me. He cut her off, rage spilling from every word. You let my children call you mother. You're trying to replace Catherine. In this house, trying to take a place that was never yours. Emily felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. She tried to speak, but no sound came. Finally, she took a shaky breath and, with tears streaming down her face, said, I never wanted to replace anyone. They see me this way because I made their mother a promise. I swore I'd care for them like they were my own. Alexander stood frozen, the anger in his eyes now tangled with disbelief. What did you say? Emily held Sophie tightly and repeated, voice trembling. Catherine asked me. The night before the accident, she found me and begged me not to let Lucas and Sophie grow up alone. I promised her. I swore it through her tears. And it's that promise I keep every single day. Alexander took a few steps back, as if struck. His heart pounded, his breathing heavy. Part of him wanted to believe her, but another part refused. 2. You're making this up to manipulate my children. To manipulate me. Emily wiped her tears with the sleeve of her blouse but kept her gaze steady. There's nothing for me to gain from that promise, only everything to lose. But even so, I won't break it, because I gave my word to a woman who knew she was about to leave. The silence that followed was suffocating. The rain outside seemed to amplify the weight of her revelation. Alexander stared at Emily, his chest warring with anger, pain, and doubt. If you're lying, he said, voice low but laced with threat, I swear you'll regret every word. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, whispering, It's not a lie. I only wish you could understand. Alexander left the room without another word, but his face carried more than fury now, it carried fear. Fear that she might be telling the truth. In the quiet, Emily tucked the twins back in, dried her tears, and kissed their foreheads. I won't fail you. Not you. And not her. Alexander had spent the entire night awake. In his office, eyes fixed on a glass of whiskey that no longer tasted like anything, he tried to convince himself that Emily had made the story up. But something inside him gnawed at his certainty, the unsettling feeling that her words carried. Truth. The next morning, he ordered his driver to take him downtown. Without saying a word to anyone, he walked into an old cafe with a simple storefront one Catherine used to visit when she wanted to escape the weight of their luxurious life. The place still held the scent of fresh coffee and homemade cakes. A world away from the cold sophistication of Beverly Hills, Alexander approached the counter and showed a photo of Catherine to the woman behind it. Do you remember this woman? My wife used to come here. The employee, a gray-haired woman with a tired smile, nodded. Yes, she came almost every week. She used to talk a lot with one of the waitresses, a young woman named Emily. Alexander's heart pounded. The woman went on, they had a beautiful friendship. Your wife seemed lighter when she talked to her. That same afternoon, Alexander tracked down a former manager of the cafe, a short man with thick glasses who remembered Catherine's last visit clearly. It was strange, the man said, thoughtfully. She seemed distressed, like she needed to vent. Spoke about feeling alone, about how you were always absent. And I saw her cry. Emily was with her that night. I remember it well, because the two of them hugged near the exit like it was a goodbye. The words fell on Alexander like stones. He tried to argue, but his own memories of Catherine began to surface. The sadness in her eyes in her final months, the silent dinners, the cold touch of her hands as she pulled away from him in bed. That night, back at the mansion, Alexander locked himself in the bedroom and opened a drawer where he kept some of his wife's belongings. Among letters and notes, he found a small blue notebook he had never read. Hands trembling, he opened to the last written page. "If something happens to me, I don't want my children to grow up with only luxury and rules." Alexander never knew how to give them what they truly need: human warmth. "Emily, you understand? I trust you. Please promise you'll protect them for me." The words blurred before his eyes. He let the notebook fall to the floor and ran his hands down his face. His breathing was heavy, staggered, as if every sentence in that confession tore through his soul. "She didn't trust me," he murmured, voice cracking. "My own wife chose to trust a stranger." The millionaire collapsed to his knees on the carpet, the pride that had always sustained him now in ruins. Tears, something he rarely allowed himself, slid down in silence. The image of his children calling Emily mommy now made sense. It wasn't betrayal. It was the continuation of Catherine's will. At that moment, a soft knock on the door made him look up. It was Lucas, leaning on his crutches. "Daddy, are you okay? I heard you talking loud." Alexander quickly wiped his face, trying to collect himself. "I'm fine, son. Go back to bed." Lucas limped into the room, ignoring the instruction. He approached and placed his small hand on his father's shoulder. "You don't have to cry alone. Mommy used to say when we cry, our heart gets lighter." Alexander felt his chest break into pieces. The child, in his innocence, was repeating the very words Catherine once said. The weight of guilt became unbearable. He pulled his son into a tight embrace, as if afraid of losing him too, and in that embrace, the millionaire finally understood. All his coldness, all his pride had cost him the trust of the woman who knew him best. And now, if he wasn't careful, it would cost him the love of his children too. Alexander didn't sleep that night. Catherine's notebook still lay on the office table like a ghost that wouldn't let him breathe. The revelation had stripped him of every layer of arrogance. For the first time, he saw himself as small in the face of his own life. The hours dragged on until a muffled scream shattered the silence of the mansion. It was Lucas. The boy's voice echoed in desperation from upstairs. Alexander rushed instinctively through the hallways toward the children's room. When he opened the door, he found Emily kneeling beside the bed. Lucas was sitting up, his face contorted in pain, hands gripping his frail legs. Sweat streamed down the child's forehead, and Sophie watched from the corner of the bed, scared and silent. "It hurts so much, Emily. I can't move them right." Lucas sobbed, struggling not to cry. Emily, exhausted, held the boy's small legs, massaging them gently, tears sliding discreetly down her own cheeks. "I know, my love, I know. Breathe with me. It's going to pass, I promise." Alexander froze at the door, heart pounding, paralyzed by the scene. He had never witnessed such complete devotion. Emily looked like she was carrying the boy's pain in her own body. "Let me help," he said suddenly, his voice deep but no. Longer hard. Emily looked up, surprised. She was pale, her hair falling loose from her ponytail, her blouse wrinkled from long nights holding small, trembling bodies. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded, too tired to argue. Alexander stepped forward, removed his jacket, and rolled up his sleeves. He sat on the edge of the bed and placed his hand on his son's forehead. "He's burning up. We need to calm him down." Emily handed him a damp cloth. "Wipe the back of his neck. It helps." He followed her instructions gently. Lucas whimpered, but little by little, his breathing began to steady. Alexander glanced at the nanny and saw in her eyes a quiet kind of gratitude. "You do this every time he's in pain?" he asked softly. Emily nodded. "Every time. He needs patience, not pressure. Every crisis is a battle for him, and I can't let him fight it alone." The words struck Alexander deeply. He remembered all. The times he had brushed off his children's pleas for attention, thinking that expensive doctors and modern treatments were enough. But now he understood nothing replaced real presence. As Lucas finally drifted into sleep, Emily gently pulled the blanket over him. Her hands trembled with exhaustion. Without thinking, Alexander reached out and held her fingers for a moment. "You shouldn't have to carry all this alone," he murmured. Emily slowly withdrew her hand, but there was no hostility in her movement, only vulnerability. "Someone has to be here when the pain comes. If not me, then who?" Alexander didn't reply. He simply stayed seated beside her in silence, watching Lucas breathe more easily. Sophie, now drowsy, lay down again and murmured softly, "You two take care of us better when you're together." The girl's innocent words floated in the air, cutting through every remaining barrier. Alexander and Emily exchanged a long look, charged with something new. No longer just tension, but a spark of shared understanding, born from pain, born from love. The millionaire, so used to control, realized that in that room, facing his children's fragility, he wasn't the one who set the rules. It was Emily, who held the power to give the twins something even Catherine hadn't believed he could offer: true love. When they finally left the room, the rainy night still hung over the city, but somehow it felt quieter. In the hallway, Alexander paused, hesitated, and then said in a tone gentler than he'd ever used with her, "Thank you for not giving up on them, even when I did." Emily lowered her eyes, heart pounding, and simply replied, "I didn't give up, and I never will." The silence that followed wasn't cold, but full of something they both weren't ready to name. The days that followed brought a subtle change within the Reed mansion. After the night they had shared caring for, Lucas, Alexander, and Emily began to cross paths differently. The tension between them no longer came solely from distance or suspicion. Now, each glance carried something unspoken, something both of them were trying to hide. Emily, while preparing breakfast, could feel the weight of Alexander's gaze every time he passed through the kitchen. Alexander, who used to barely notice her presence, now found himself watching the way she tied her hair, the way her smile softened when she looked at the twins. But fear surrounded them both. Emily didn't dare overstep the invisible line, terrified of losing everything. Alexander, proud and guarded, feared that letting anyone close would shatter the image of the untouchable man the world believed him to be. One sunny Sunday afternoon, he made an unexpected decision to take the children and Emily to the park. The Los Angeles sun cast golden light over the city. The trees offered patches of cool shade, and the children's laughter mixed with the joyful sounds of other families. For the first time in what felt like forever, Alexander walked without urgency, holding Lucas's hand while the boy moved carefully on his crutches, and Emily walked beside them with Sophie. Sophie ran back and forth, trying to climb a piece of playground equipment. Emily kept a close eye on her, but in a single distracted moment, the little girl stumbled and fell hard onto the rough ground. Her cry rang out immediately. "Emily!" Sophie cried, raising her small, bloodied hand. Emily rushed to her, falling to her knees beside the child. Her heart raced, panic flooding her face. "Oh God, Sophie. Don't move, sweetheart. It's going to be okay." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she tried to stop the bleeding with her bare hands. Alexander arrived, quickly kneeling beside them. He took hold of Emily's shoulders, speaking firmly but with unexpected tenderness. "Look at me, Emily. Breathe. She's going to be fine. Don't panic." But her hand is already so fragile, and now this. Emily sobbed, on the verge of breaking down. Alexander took her hand in his, holding it tightly. "Trust me, I'm here. We'll take care of her together." Those words, spoken in the middle of chaos, hit Emily with surprising force. For the first time, she didn't feel alone in the children's pain. As Sophie finally calmed down, nestled against Alexander's chest, Emily let out a deep, trembling breath, as though all her fear had been exhaled in that one moment. Without thinking, she leaned into him, wrapping her arms tightly around his shoulders. Alexander held her in return, pulling her close to his body. And in that moment, with Sophie drifting to sleep in their arms, their eyes met, faces just inches apart. The park seemed to fall away. There was only them, a broken man, a torn woman, and a fragile child. Emily tried to pull back, but Alexander gently cupped her face. "I can't pretend anymore," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "I feel something, and I've tried to fight it." Emily shook her head, eyes brimming with tears. "We can't. This isn't right." But the space between them no longer existed. The kiss came like an inevitability, fierce, full of all the emotion they had pushed down for so long. It was brief but overwhelming, a meeting of souls that had recognized each other in grief and in tenderness. When they pulled away, breathless, Emily brought her fingers to her lips, stunned. Alexander stared at her, his gray eyes blazing with conflict. "I know I shouldn't," he confessed, almost whispering. "But you're the only one who truly understands my children. The only one who understands me." Emily looked away, holding Sophie tightly. "And that's exactly why it can't happen again." But both of them knew a line had been crossed and nothing would ever be the same. That afternoon in the park became etched in the hearts of Alexander and Emily, but it was also the beginning of their undoing. Between the shared glances and the forbidden kiss, there burned a fire that couldn't remain hidden for long. And it was in the silence of that secret that a shadow emerged, one that would threaten everything. Victoria Holiday. Victoria was a well-known Los Angeles socialite, an ex-girlfriend of Alexander, obsessed with reclaiming the status she'd lost. When he left her, tall with platinum blonde hair and a calculated smile, she had connections in the media and knew how to destroy reputations with a single whisper. When she spotted Alexander and Emily together at the park carrying an injured Sophie and exchanging a charged look, jealousy ignited a firestorm inside her. The very next day, gossip columns flooded social media. Billionaire Alexander Reed, romantically involved with children's nanny? The story spread like wildfire, fueled by rumors that Emily had taken advantage of the twins' vulnerability to seduce their powerful father Dot at Alexander's company. The board didn't take long to respond. In a tense meeting, one director stated firmly, "This could tarnish the company's image. Allegations of manipulation, of personal interest. We need a clear stance." Alexander kept his face composed, but inside, he was in turmoil. He knew the accusations were unjust. Yet the media pressure, the investors' fear, it all grew unbearable. Meanwhile, Victoria, dripping venom, anonymously fed more stories to journalists, painting Emily as a gold digger using the children to climb the ladder. That night, Alexander came home with a heavy heart. He found Emily in the living room, helping Sophie draw while Lucas maneuvered his crutches, celebrating small victories. The air was filled with warmth until his cold presence stilled everything. "We need to talk," he said flatly. Emily looked up, instantly sensing something was wrong. Her brown eyes filled with concern. "What happened?" Alexander drew a breath, each word sharp as a blade. "Things got out of control. The press, the company. Everyone believes you got close to me for personal gain, that you used my children to do it." Emily stepped back, feeling the floor vanish beneath her feet. "No, that's not true, you know that." But Alexander looked away. "It doesn't matter what I know. It matters what the world believes. And to protect my children, my family, my company, you can't stay here anymore." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. "You're firing me? In front of them?" Lucas dropped his crutches and ran to her, clinging to her waist. "No, Daddy. Don't let Emily leave. She's the only one who stays with me when I'm in pain." Sophie, crying, grabbed Emily's hand. "Please, Daddy, don't take her away. Emily is like Mommy." The words sliced through Alexander like a knife. He struggled to stay firm, but his voice faltered. "And that's exactly why she has to go. You've confused her place." Emily collapsed to her knees, hugging the twins tightly. Her tears soaked their hair as she whispered, "I never wanted it to be like this. I promised your mother I'd never leave you. But it looks like I'm going to break that promise." The children's desperate cries echoed through the room. "Don't go, Emily. Stay with us." Alexander turned his face away, unable to watch. He felt torn to pieces, but his decision seemed final. With trembling hands, Emily gently loosened the children's arms from around her. "I love you more than anything, but I don't have a choice." She stood up slowly, walking toward the door, eyes full of tears. Before leaving, she cast one last look at Alexander. "One day, maybe, you'll understand what you've lost." The door shut with a thud that echoed through the mansion. Lucas fell to the floor, sobbing, while Sophie screamed Emily's name. Alexander stood frozen, fists clenched, his heart at war between duty and a love he still didn't have the courage to claim. That night, the Reed mansion was colder and quieter than ever before. The days following Emily's departure turned the Reed mansion into a desolate place. The marble floors still gleamed, the halls remained spotless, but the silence was piercing. Lucas refused to practice with his crutches, spending most of his time seated, eyes fixed on the floor. Sophie, once full of energy, no longer laughed or ran through the garden. She spent hours clutching her pillow, softly calling Emily's name, Alexander. Watched it all from afar, and each moment felt like a sentence passed down on him. He tried to keep his routine, attending meetings, signing contracts, but nothing could fill the emptiness waiting for him at home. Emily's final words echoed in his mind night after night. "One day, maybe you'll understand what you've lost." On a stormy night, he found Lucas crying alone in his room. The boy held the workbook Emily used to teach Sophie and in a broken voice said, "Daddy, Emily promised Mommy she'd never leave us, but you made her go." Alexander dropped too, his knees before his son, unable to stop his own tears. "I was wrong, Lucas. I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was take away the one person you needed most." And in that moment, he understood. The pride that had always guided him meant nothing in the face of the pain in his children's eyes. Money, power, reputation, all of it seemed laughable now compared to the absence of love that weighed so heavily on their home. The next morning, Alexander set business aside and went to Inglewood, a world away from his opulent lifestyle. He walked the modest streets, heart-pounding, until he found the small apartment where Emily lived. He knocked, and when she opened the door, she stood in silence. Emily looked thinner, the dark circles under her eyes speaking of sleepless nights. She was surprised to see him, but said nothing. Alexander took a deep breath and, in a gesture he'd never imagined himself making, dropped to his knees. "Emily, I was wrong. I failed you. I failed my children. I failed myself. I let pride speak louder than love. And now, I don't know how to live without you." Emily's heart trembled, but she stepped back. "Don't say that, Alexander. I can't afford to believe again. I lost everything the day you sent me away." He lifted his tear-filled eyes. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm here because I've learned the hardest lesson. Of my life, money, and power don't replace love. I want to be a different man, not just for you, but for our children." Emily still hesitated, but in that moment, two voices cut through the tension. "Emily, Lucas and Sophie, who had run down the stairs after recognizing his voice, wrapped their arms around her, crying tears of joy. "Please, don't leave again." Sophie begged, "Come back home with us." Lucas added, gripping her hand tightly. Emily couldn't hold back. She hugged them both, tears streaming down her face. Alexander, still kneeling, watched the scene unfold, a spark of hope flickering in his chest. With a trembling voice, Emily finally looked at him. "If I come back, it won't be for your fortune, Alexander. It'll be for the children. And because, despite everything I tried to resist, I've fallen in love with you too." Alexander slowly stood and took her hand in his. "Then give me the chance to be the man you all deserve." The four of them embraced there, in the humble apartment in Inglewood. No luxury, no cameras, no masks. For the first time, Alexander Reed was no longer the cold, powerful millionaire. He was simply a man learning to love, finally realizing that true wealth lies in the humanity he'd always lacked. In that tight embrace, in the mingled tears and fragile smiles, a new family was born, not built on image, but on trust, healing, and true love. And so, we come to the end of this powerful story filled with pain, healing, and real love. Now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this journey? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me which part touched you the most. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who loves emotional stories too, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. And before you go, I've picked out another story for you, one that's even more emotional, and I'm sure it will touch your heart even deeper.